Meeting tonight is June 12th, 2017. We're holding a special meeting basically out of respect for the applicant. In this particular case, they filed a notice of intent. Is that you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. The applicant filed a notice of intent, and we worked with them along with an outside consultant to provide an evaluation. The consultant, Matt, is unavailable tomorrow, and so we agreed to have the meeting tonight so that we could be respectful and not cause another couple weeks. So
we appreciate it. Thank you.
not a problem. All right. So as folks may recall, during our previous meetings, we discussed the application that was before us. We discussed the roadway. We discussed the habitat analysis. And we discussed this review. This peer review occurred. We did our walk back in, was it May? Was it?
It was June.
June?
Yeah, early June.
I think we tried for May. And
Yeah.
Right, and we had a bad weather day, I think.
yeah, it seems to run with this project. So at that time, we conducted a site walk.
June 13th.
Thank you very much. We conducted a site walk with the applicant and Matt from WSS. During that time, we were able to review the property, review the flagging, review the laid out portions of the road. After that time, Matt prepared his evaluation, which we received last Friday. Thank you again. And here we are tonight to discuss the application as we have before us and the peer review in front of us. So I think the first thing I would say is, do you have anything to add since our last walk or meeting on site?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So Matt, if you wouldn't mind, would you please go through your peer review? I did have a chance to read through the whole thing, but if you could pick out the high points for us, that would be hugely appreciated.
Certainly. Excuse me. I think the high points, well, first, the Conservation Commission asked me to look at essentially 4 issues: whether the proposed project, the access road that is, qualifies as what's called a limited project under the Wetland Protection Act. Secondly, asked about my thoughts on the adequacy of the wildlife habitat evaluation that was prepared by Oxbow Associates. Thirdly, how a determination of compliance with the Wetland Protection Act is or could be affected by the site being located in an area of critical environmental concern. And then lastly, whether the proposed project complies with the Commonwealth's stormwater management standards. So I ran through all of those as I lay out here in the report, the various portions of the Wetland Protection Act regulations that speak to these issues. And I think the high points are, first, that this project, the access road, could qualify as one of 2 possible limited projects. One for what people often refer to as the residential access road limited project, and a later addition to the regs for access roads to renewable energy projects. And it seems like it could fit either one, particularly because we have a renewable energy project, but there's also the issue of future use of 2 lots for residential development, whether that comes to pass or not. So the potential is there for either one. There are slightly different standards for each, and I addressed those in here, but either way, I think obviously it's the Commission's discretion on how to permit this if it agrees, but I think it could qualify for either one. Secondly, the adequacy, this is in no particular order, but the adequacy of the wildlife habitat evaluation from Oxbow Associates. Very small area of bordering vegetated wetland, not particularly diverse. It has a variety of exotic plant species growing in it. There's nothing particularly unique about it, fairly average. And I wound up agreeing with Oxbow that there's very limited or minor, or I think as they put it, negligible impact to wildlife habitat from the proposed access road. And in particular, because the applicant is proposing compensatory mitigation in the form of 2 replication areas, that would more than make up for the area to be filled and the damage to wildlife habitat. So I agreed with Oxbow on that point. Thirdly, how a determination of compliance with the Act is or could be affected by the site being located in what's called an ACEC, or area of critical environmental concern. A quick read of the regs tells you that a project located in an ACEC and that would fill bordering vegetated wetland cannot be permitted, except in the case of a limited project. And in this case, you have a limited project. Assuming again that the CONCOM decides to agree and say, yes, this qualifies as a limited project, that's the only framework in which a project that would fill BVW in an ACEC can be permitted. And I address some of the conditions that need to be complied with. Principally, the provision for replication of filled BVW. The one aspect of this that I think I called out in a footnote is that, and Oxbow noted this as well in their wildlife habitat evaluation, there's a small area of bank, what's called bank, which is a resource area under the Wetland Protection Act, 95 linear feet, you count both sides of the intermittent stream, that was not accounted for, not described in the notice of intent. And the impact to it, even though it's minor, also was not described in the notice of intent, at least the version that I have, which I assume was the final.
If I may pause you for
Yes.
a second. Do we have a plan of the project so we could identify this area just before we go past it?
It's the area where the access road would cross the intermittent stream coming off the residential properties.
I can point to it, but I don't know where it is.
Yeah, it's hard to see at this scale, but these lines,
see it.
these
It's-
lines represent where we surveyed the bank to be.
Right.
And we weren't fully aware of the presence of the bank until Oxbow went out and said, hey, we've got some bank here. It's not, they told us it wasn't very, the habitat wasn't really there, but there is, for that intermittent stream channel, it's about a 4-inch bank.
So unfortunately, this area was really thick with vegetation. We identified the opening of the culvert pipe on the far side.
That's correct.
Were you able to get back in there to see?
Yeah,
it?
I looked at that,
You
right.
get back in there?
Yes.
Okay.
And I agree with Oxbow that I did not measure it as they did. I take their measurement as accurate. I know the people that did the habitat evaluation, and they're extremely diligent in what they do. So it was about like 42 feet on each side, roughly, of the intermittent stream, and there is I guess what I call a discernible bank, even though it's very slight, and that's what was not described in the notice of intent, nor the impact. It's sort of two-part. The resource area of bank should be identified, the box should have been checked, and it should have listed, 95 feet or plus or minus as impact to the area.
So from an overall standpoint, if that area was already located in a segment of the project that's identified as BVW, is there a distinct difference between bank versus BVW
Yes.
with regard to the regulations?
Yes. There are two different types of resource areas. they have performance standards for each in the regs. In this case, this is the bank is truly minor. The length and the substance of it, as Oxbow Associates noted in their wildlife habitat evaluation. It's negligible, but it should have been identified.
Okay. Where were we again on the 5,000 square foot? Is that, so we had originally talked about part of the limited project status was less than 5,000 square feet. So does this have an effect on that number?
Not really, no.
Okay. Thank you.
You have a copy of that map in your files, though. There's a email from Kyle, and on the back side of it. Yep. Nope. Just had it.
Oh. All right, so identified here is the intermittent stream channel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so that's the footnote under the ACEC notes.
I think that's right.
Footnote number 2 on page 8.
Right.
Excellent. And I know you've got number 3 on here, something we talked about at length, that
Yes.
this isn't flood zone A, it's inappropriate.
Right. It's which is not uncommon for FEMA mapping at all.
We could go take a look right now and see.
See if there's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Please continue.
So I think that got me through the wildlife habitat, and I want to just step back for a minute to the limited project status. A part of reviewing something, a proposed project, a filling of BVW for limited project access road, is that there's a requirement for that filling, for the access road itself to be at either the narrowest part of a crossing where you're filling the least amount of BVW and to avoid and minimize that kind of impact to the greatest extent possible. And as I noted in my report, GPR did an alternatives analysis, but the comparisons between alternatives were all relative, with really no numbers for what the impacts would be between alternatives. All they said in their alternatives analysis was, and this is not entirely accurate, but just as an example, alternative B would fill or cause more damage to BVW than alternative A. B would be more damaging than, and so they made those sorts of relative comparisons, but there were no absolute numbers except for the preferred alternative F. And so in order for the Concom to make a fully informed decision, they should be presented with the numbers that each of those alternatives would fill in terms of BVW so that the record is clear and the Concom can make the correct decision. And it may be that F is, in fact, the least damaging of all those alternatives, but there's no way to really conclude that with the information, at least that I saw.
Mr. Chairman, I can address that if you'd like.
I tell you what, why don't we finish this? Because I remember this from our actual discussion the first time, because there was no qualification on the individual, alternatives.
So moving on then, the next was the ACEC issue. And again, as I said, the real key here is that the only way to permit the filling of BVW in an ACEC is for that filling to be part of a limited project. I've already addressed that point. It is, or could be, if the Concom agrees and decides this, it could qualify as a limited project, and that's the only way it could be permitted within an ACEC. So again, that's another decision for the commission to make. And finally, on the stormwater management standards for Massachusetts, as I said in my report, I reviewed a lot of relevant information, the plans. I went and met with Kyle one morning just to have him run me through, so I made sure I understood what they were proposing. And it's a little, how shall we put it? It's a little uncommon for what they're proposing with all of the measures to control stormwater, most of those above the road, upslope, to keep them out of the BVW. That's a logical provision to limit damage. They've proposed some underground storage, a couple of infiltration basins, several measures that I go through in the report. And my review of that and comparing it to the stormwater management standards is that it complies with the standards. It's a little bit more complicated than you would normally see because they're trying to fit this into a very narrow area, that sort of little sliver of land between the access road and the adjoining property line. But they seem to have done that here. I think one thing for sure, and I think I mentioned this, if I didn't, I was a little negligent there, but there definitely should be a project monitor, independent monitor during construction.
You mentioned it.
I didn't. And stormwater management should be a key aspect that an independent monitor watches in terms of construction and making sure that what's constructed in the field matches the proposed plans and what you see in the large-scale plans for stormwater management. And over time, they have an operation and maintenance plan, an O&M plan, that lays out all of the standard provisions that would apply here, and that's going to need some oversight or monitoring as well to be sure that all of the O&M is carried out over time. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of highlights. The Concom, I guess, has to deliberate and make some decisions on these various aspects.
Matt, thanks again for your help. So while we have Matt with us, Cal, you wanted to address the items on the alternatives? Do you have a new alternative analysis?
I do. Well, I have a slightly revised alternatives analysis that is closer to it. So Matt's exactly right. And the first thing to understand, if you remember, alternative A, and I don't have them all laid out. Alternative A had an alternate entrance instead of the sharp turn. It went down the road and crossed over to a knoll and then crossed over. That is a definite different alternative than the other ones. But from B through F, and one of the points Matt raised was we didn't have any different numbers as far as the effect on the crossing. And really B through F, all it was we started with B and we kind of progressed to F. And so we gave you a copy of the plan at each step along the way. But all those B through F, after we got done with understanding how our stormwater management worked for that entrance, they would all have the same crossing numbers.
Okay.
None of them would be any different where we did the crossing of the wetlands, because that is the optimal of all of those. So it's just really a progression from where we started with about 3,000 square feet, and then we worked our way through doing Kyle, doing the stormwater management design. By the time it was done with that, it had pushed the road a little bit out, and so that impact had grown to 4,390 square feet. But any of those crossings would have been identical. They would have all been 4,390 from B through F. So really, there's only 3 alternatives that are actually different, that have different numbers. Alternative A If you take the 4390 for the crossing that we eventually got to, and you add an extra 1,700 square feet, which the plan calls out, for the crossing of that first initial piece of wetland, right as you come off the knoll, that'd bring us to 6,090 square feet. So alternative A exceeds the 5,000 square foot wetland filling, which is why we bailed out on that one. B through F all have 4,390 square feet of wetland filling, but with different effects on the abutters. But those effects on the abutters, those changes to the abutters, tree screening and whatnot, do not have anything to do with that wetland crossing at the entrance for the driveway. Those basically stay the same. And the only difference in impacts between them is both to the abutters themselves or to the buffer zone around that finger, that broad finger of wetlands that come up just before you rise up the hill to get to the solar site. At one point we talked, and I think it's alternative D, we talked about that one, and I've added to our analysis the fact that we were looking at in excess of 10,000 square feet of buffer zone impact immediately above the wetland on that steep slope, which is one of the reasons we decided not to use that, plus the fact that Kyle had gotten to a point in his design where he was convinced that we would not be able to meet the stormwater management standards with that. It would not provide enough storage for us with that design, which is really what caused them to abandon that. So we knew that we were going to disturb a lot more wetlands buffer zone than we would otherwise. And we also knew that we were not going to be able to meet the stormwater management standards with that.
What was number A?
D.
D. Okay.
D. But other than that, and even with D, it still had the same wetland crossing, 4,390 square feet. So the third alternative that I mentioned is something that we handled offline after this, and if you remember, we gave you an email train of our conversations with the state about the possibility of crossing the rail trail to access it from the other side. And that was actually our initial attempt to get into the site. That's what we were going to do, to get into the site and avoid this completely. And the state said, no, it's an act of the legislature. We never do that. We don't ever let anybody cross the rail trail. Forget it.
Is that Article 97 then?
I think so.
Rail trail? Must be.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that takes an act.
Right. So we gave you that documentation. So really, those are the only three alternatives that are different with respect to the wetland crossing itself and the amount of impact on the resource. And that's all spelled out, and I added a conclusion section and spelled that out in revised.
So just a quick question, if I might, is that okay?
Please do.
Where you say in the original, under alternative B, the second to last sentence, it says, this layout did stay well below the 5,000 square feet of wetland disturbance in its initial form. So that well below 5,000 is the 4,390?
Well, at the time, when we did alternative B, we thought we were in about 3,000 square feet. We thought we were going to be about 3,000 square feet, and it was only, and we thought that as we progressed through some of these other ones, but it was only when Kyle started finalizing the stormwater management numbers and cranking through and seeing how much storage we actually had, and that things started to swell and it got bigger. So at the time, that was correct. We thought we were around 3,000, but it turns out that any of these alternatives would be at the 4,390 to get the wetland crossing to work the way we designed it.
And that's clear in the revised?
In the revised, yes.
I would say it's mostly clear. I don't know that it's clear, because your paragraph for B still says, did stay well
Yeah.
below the 5,000, which, given the final design, would have settled out at 4,390.
Yeah, I should have, but I didn't catch that.
Your ballpark.
And I added the conclusion regarding alternatives at the end, where I basically said there's really only 3 different alternatives that would qualify as different.
Sorry, sign up for it, buddy.
Okay. Thank you for this. So it feels like if we were to start backwards from the beginning with each one of these projects, the first thing that happens on the project before we understand any of it is there's flagging, and that flagging is approved. We walked to the site. We did extensive testing on the site using the auger to check soils as well as check vegetation. So we felt very comfortable that the line was appropriate. And in fact, even though it was early in the year, our walk later in the year showed that the vegetation was in keeping with what you had found early in the year. So from a wetland perspective, identifying the boundary between what was upland and what was BBW, that certainly seemed accurate. The next thing to consider is the ACEC. And as discussed through Mark's analysis, the ACEC, if the project appears as a limited project, then it is approved under their regulations that you could have filling, as stated here. 310 CMR 10.53 Part 3 states, notwithstanding the provisions of 310 CMR 10.54 through 10.58 and 10.60, the issuing authority may issue an order of conditions and impose such conditions as will contribute to the interests identified in Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, permitting the following limited projects, although no such project may be permitted which will have an adverse effect on the specified habitat sites of rare species as identified by procedures established under 310 CMR 10.59. So to be completely clear, Oxbow's review and your review state that we will not have any adverse effects on specified habitat sites.
No, this is not mapped habitat by the Heritage Program.
So it's in the ACEC, but it's
in the ACEC, but it is not mapped habitat, either estimated or priority habitat for endangered species.
very much. So we have a buffer, we have an ACEC, which is applicable during a limited project. A limited project involves, go back and make sure I'm reading through it thoroughly. As Matt identified, and thank you again, Matt, for this being so thorough, 310 CMR 10.583 lists 19 types of projects that can qualify as a limited project. Subparagraph 3E states a driveway or...
What page are you on?
I'm on page 3. A driveway or a new roadway of minimum legal and practical width would fall under a limited project status. And 3 Section T says that construction, page 4, says the construction of a new access roadway or improvement, repair, and or replacement of existing access roadway needed to transport equipment to a renewable energy project site can qualify for limited project status. So in both cases, the potential uses of the roadway fall under, are approved as limited project status. Then, as far as being a limited project, we have the less than 5,000 square foot disturbance.
That's correct.
This states, once a commission determines that a proposed project meets one or more of the limited project types, 310 CMR 10.53 Part 3 instructs that in determining whether to exercise its discretion to approve a limited project, the issuing authority shall consider the following factors: magnitude of alteration, significance of the project site to the interests identified in MGL 131, Section 40, the availability of reasonable alternatives to the proposed activity, the extent to which adverse impacts are minimized, and the extent to which mitigation measures, including replication or restoration, are provided to contribute to the protections of the interests. So, from the beginning, Availability of reasonable alternatives. We've just discussed the alternatives analysis. At this point, the best alternative is one that's not available to you, which is passage over the rail trail. After that, you have a number of roadway alternatives, but they all basically involve the same passage. They all have to cross in the same place.
That's exactly right.
And at this point, they all end at plus or minus 4390 from B through F. A, of course, is a different and has additional impact. Okay? It says that after discussing reasonable alternatives, extent to which adverse impacts are minimized, Matt put together a paragraph indicating that on page 6, that impact minimization and mitigation measures would be the use of the retaining walls to steepen the side slopes, reduce filling, realigning and installing 2 new arch culverts under the access road at the intermittent stream crossing with a level spreader at the discharge to reduce discharge velocity, allow for sediment and or pollutants to settle out and be retained. Placing stormwater treatment features, in other words, stormwater infiltration basin, tree box filters, and sediment forebays on the upslope side of, as well as beneath, the underground detention facility of the access road. Constructing infiltration basins and water quality swales at the perimeter of the solar array area, and constructing 2 wetland creation areas adjacent to the impact area along the access road to provide adequate replication for the BVW area filled by the access road. Can you please restate what was the amount of filling in the wetland that's required for the project?
4,000.
So 4390 is the filling
That's the
itself.
filling.
It's not the, that's the filling, that's not the overall impact. In other words, so you're in the BVW for greater than 4390, but the actual filling impact is 4390.
No, the total impact on the BBW is 4390.
What's the square area of filling that's required for the roadway where it crosses over?
4390? Well, it's trying to exclude the walls that are holding up the road because it's simply a line that's drawn at the limits of work. So
Right.
it's disturbance of the BBW, whether it's filling or excavation.
Oh, no, I understand. Sorry, I'm not asking it properly. I understand that your overall disturbance is 4390, but what is the actual filled area inside the BVW where the road crosses over? There's an area that you are
The act looks at what they call alteration.
right.
That's the standard. It could be filling, could be cutting of vegetation,
Okay.
could be a whole variety of different activities that all fall under the ambit of alteration.
I just didn't know if we had a
So-
square area. So
Yeah.
obviously I'm impacting the
So-
BVW on both sides, but what am I actually filling? I just didn't know if you had a square area for what you're actually filling.
I think
If
it's
that
probably,
makes sense.
probably close to the 43.
Pretty
It is the 4390
Okay.
because there's a line on the downstream side of the roadway, and we are impacting the BBW all the way up to the head wall of the culvert. That is how that was established.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so directly from the limited project type instructions, it says to consider the availability of reasonable alternatives, which we've discussed, extent to which those adverse impacts are minimized, as discussed, the extent to which mitigation measures, including replication and restoration, are provided. So at this point, you have the 2 areas of replication. And Matt, you found that those were appropriate?
Yes. Considering
I remember you, oh, here it is.
Considering the magnitude of the impact and the significance of the BVW being affected by that filling, yes, I found the proposed replication sufficient. It's a little bit in excess of the 4390 that will be filled, or altered, I should say. And so, yeah, it does meet the replication standards, at least in my opinion, yeah.
Okay. And then last but not least, it says contributing to the protection of the interests. And Matt, you
Page 6, I ran through
listed them out.
the 8 interests and then very briefly a bullet list of those that I thought might be affected and how.
So, just to finalize that, it says, area BVW which would be affected, of limited significance to the interests of the Wetland Protection Act. The elements are protection of public and private water supply. There is no nearby public or private water supply. Protection of groundwater supply. There is no groundwater supply nearby. Flood control, minor flood control in the form of volume storage, and as identified, the FEMA map is inaccurate.
Right.
Storm damage prevention, no ability to provide storm. Prevention of pollution, minimum opportunity to prevent pollution, opportunity to prevent pollution. Protection of land containing shellfish, no land containing shellfish. Protection of fisheries, no or only minor and tangential opportunity to provide protection of fisheries. And last, protection of wildlife habitat, minor ability to protect the wildlife habitat, see habitat evaluation. So at this point, the last element that we discussed was the wildlife habitat evaluation. This was prepared by Oxbow Associates. The evaluation indicated that the proposed BVW alterations would have a negligible effect upon the important wildlife habitat functions, particularly when considered in conjunction with the compensatory wetland replication areas proposed by the applicant. So from start to finish, we have a wetland line that we've agreed to. We have an ACEC that is permissible to perform filling in if you meet limited project standards. We meet the limited project standards. We have, based on the fact that we have an alternatives analysis, we're less than 5,000 square feet of affected space. And through both the habitat study and your alternatives analysis, we prove, or the applicant has proven that that there are no reasonable alternatives and that wildlife will not be affected in that area. So the 4 items that we were discussing: limited project, adequacy of wildlife habitat evaluation, determination of compliance with WPA in an ACEC, and mass stormwater. The last item was stormwater. And in your opinion, Matt, their stormwater calculations, you did note that there was a calculation mistake just on area in acres versus square footage.
Yeah. Minor. It didn't affect the rest of the analysis.
Calculations.
Yeah.
Okay. Jess, do you have anything else that I missed?
Just one question on the, right at the moment. Do you feel satisfied with GPR's alternatives analysis revision?
Now that I understand it a little more fully, yes, I do. Yeah.
George? Bonnie?
I have a couple questions. So one question regarding the northern area of the array next to the rail trail. There is a significant wetland area that is adjacent to the rail trail.
There's a depression there.
Yeah, so it's a wetland.
Yeah.
Was that walked?
It was walked and it was not flagged as a wetland. Our consultant didn't feel that was a wetland.
And why is that?
My understanding is he didn't feel qualified. It didn't have all the components of a wetland water supply. It wasn't adjacent to anything. I mean, Matt could probably tell you better than I.
Well, a bordering vegetated wetland has to be bordering on a body of water, a stream, a pond, a lake, whatever you want to call it.
It's right.
So
right,
this is the other kind of vegetated wetland
right,
is an isolated,
right,
and
right.
that would have to meet isolated land subject to flooding to be, or to qualify
right,
as a resource area.
right.
I wasn't asked to look at the wetland line. I wasn't asked to look at whether all the resource areas had been identified accurately.
Mhm.
The only reason I picked up on the bank is because I walked through there
Right,
and
right.
saw that, and because it affects the habitat evaluation and that crossing, I noted it,
Right.
as did Oxbow. But I did walk through that upper area. I did not address that in my report because it was really outside the area of work and not something I was asked to do.
I mean, I think for entirety of the project, and because it is in an area of critical environmental concern, all areas of the project should be considered.
Well, that was considered, and he did not think it met the standard, because we asked him to specifically look at that, and then called him and said, what did you find on that? And he said, no, I didn't see that as a wetland, it didn't meet the requirements for a wetland. So it was considered, he just did not
Just a
believe
quick
it.
clarification. I don't believe there's any activity proposed
There's
in that
not.
depression.
No, there's not,
And
we're staying.
even if it met the standard for isolated
Mhm.
land subject to flooding, it has no, ILSF as they call it, has no buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could literally work up to the edge of it
Mm-hmm.
and still be fine. I'm not suggesting that that's the smart thing to do, but because there's no work proposed in that depression, we'll call it for now,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't, even if it was a mistake and should have been identified,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't appear at least to affect the project.
This is an important point to part, it was an important place to point out as well that under the state bylaw, an isolated wetland doesn't have the protections of a BVW. And because we don't have our own bylaw that stipulates that it's protected separately,
Right.
it's not protected.
Right. No, I totally understand that, and
But we are respecting.
no, I know,
the
and
state
I totally understand that. I'm just, in the entirety of the project, and in terms of, area that is, wooded next to, wetland. It's an upland. It's a contiguous piece of property that, continues and bisects other areas.
It is, but there's no, when you say it's contiguous to the rest of the project, but it's
Right,
not
right.
tied to any other wetlands or any
Well, it's-
others.
Right, it's tied to the whole ACEC district,
It's in
right?
the ACEC
Right, that continues to the Nashua River, right? I mean, it's a whole contiguous sort of strip that,
Which is why we
Which is-
decided we really didn't
right.
want impacted. so we
Right,
stayed
right,
away from it.
exactly, right. That's, right, that was just a question that I was kind of concerned
did,
about
yeah, we did
why
look.
that area wasn't
Yeah.
picked up.
No, we did look.
Okay.
Decided to be conservative and stay out of it.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a few.
Okay, no,
So, in terms of, I'm just going to go through my notes here. You mentioned maintenance plan, in terms of down the road. Is there, a plan to maintain the road, whether it's a private road or, an access road to the solar site? I mean, who maintains that over
Well,
time?
it qualifies as a driveway, it's not a road, it's a
Okay,
driveway.
it's a driveway.
So, property owners would have to do that, would have to maintain the driveway
And they
itself.
would-
It is gonna be paved partway down it, which is gonna help eliminate a lot of potential for erosion just because it's paved
Mhm.
and the runoff is sheeted off into the stormwater management.
And they would maintain all of that stormwater
Sure.
management?
Yeah, and that
The
was
homeowners
that
would?
was one of the, yeah, they have to, and that was one of the elements of Matt's
That's how it was designed.
design. And, with the solar project, I mean, they've got a big investment in that project, so
Mhm.
they're gonna want to maintain access to it.
That's okay.
Property owners that would maintain would likely, would at least in the entirety of this NOI be the solar project.
Yes.
and one of the ways that we can manage it is through our conditions. If there was an order of conditions issued, we can make an order,
Mhm.
one of the conditions in the order to stipulate to the O&M plan,
Mhm.
and we can stipulate to 5 years reporting like we've done on other projects.
Mhm.
A lot of projects that we work on, the town
Mhm.
is anticipated to take over the roadway, and eventually they'll own the stormwater. This would be different than
Yeah,
that.
this is not-
Mhm.
So we don't end up conditioning the applicant a lot of times on that because it does end up being taken over by the town. But this would be a very separate
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm.
Just a quick question, clarification. So, assuming those lots were sold and houses built, those landowners would share responsibility for the paved portion of the driveway?
We can,
Well, hold on. I think my opinion would be that it would end up being the applicant, and it would continue through the COC. I think we would probably want that to either be, it would either be incumbent upon the applicant to either create an association that did that, which would probably be a lot more work than just agreeing to do it themselves. So that would be the kind of thing that we'd work with the applicant on.
Okay.
It would always be to go for the management of the project, as opposed to, folks could buy and sell the houses, and it could fall out of effort
Right.
in between.
I was just trying to understand what he was saying.
yeah, I mean, I think
beforehand.
our intention is that the solar project is responsible for that maintenance. It's-
Well, they need it, whereas
They need
the
it,
other people
right.
could park on the street and walk in if they needed to.
And then just one more question. So I know I brought this up before, in terms of, what constitutes a limited project, within the bylaw 310 CMR, there says, the applicant shall design, a roadway or driveway, which it is, right, according to the minimum length and width acceptable to the planning board. And I don't think that ever went to the planning board, and I think they rejected it on some
Yeah,
term of
let
not
me-
being,
let me clarify that, because the way,
3.
so the way that's read, basically what they do is they set a standard if you're building a roadway, not necessarily, it doesn't apply to a driveway, because planning board doesn't have standards for driveways, they have standards for roadways. And basically what they're saying is, if you're going to build a road for this crossing, which a lot of times a limited project is a road crossing, you have to build it to the minimum standards allowable by the planning board. So in other words, you have to meet their minimum standard and nothing more. You can't decide to add 2 feet of extra pavement to it. You've got to stick to what the minimum the planning board would be happy with, and that's the minimum that we want. In other words, it's an attempt to get you to build the minimum acceptable roadway, so you have the minimum impact on the wetlands and whatnot. Now, it's not a requirement that the planning board rule on the driveway or the roadway. It says in the event that the driveway, or the roadway rather, is under the jurisdiction of the planning board, you build it to the minimum of what they find acceptable. Because otherwise you'd have a conflict if the Conservation Commission said we only want 16 feet and the planning board said it's got to be a 20-foot road and we're not going to permit it, you'd set up this conflict. So basically the act looks at that and says, okay, so we're going to make them the arbiter for what the road requirement is, and the minimum you can get them to agree to is what you have to do. And in this case, you're right, it's not going to the planning board. The building inspector decided, and I know there's some disagreement about that, it's going to the ZBA for discussion next week, but the building inspector decided that this did not require site plan approval, so that's why it's not going before the planning board. However, the one thing I'd say to that is that the changes that we've made were based upon feedback from the abutters that we had at a previous discussion, a pre-meeting of the planning board. So we tried to take that into account, which is also where the E, C, D, E, F changes in the driveway came from.
Where did you end up at your minimum width? What was your width?
So I'm going with 16 feet plus
15. I think that's 15.
I heard 15 from behind you, but I didn't know if...
I think it's 16.
16.
I think it's 16 with shoulders. And that's really the minimum to serve the site that we're serving, the equipment they're going to bring down.
Which is the difference between the walking path we would prefer and what's necessary for vehicles.
Right.
Are you just reading, or did you have anything additional?
Oh, no, I just had one, no, I said I had one additional question, and I got it answered, thank you.
Okay. Okay, So at this point, I feel, for the purposes of both reiterating where we came from and to explain to the audience if there are any questions that they might have, we don't do an awful lot of projects that involve this much alteration or alteration in this way. And so, especially where this was located in such a spot with the ACEC and with regard to limited projects and having a better understanding on that, again, I really thank and appreciate the efforts from Matt and his company, Wetland Strategies and Solutions out of Merrimack. His advice was crucial in allowing us to get to the point where we can now fully appreciate that the project does meet the criteria and can be evaluated so that we can begin the process of talking about other parts and conditions. So before we do that, I think I'd like to entertain any folks in the audience. Did anyone have any questions or comments? Yes, Ken?
Can you backtrack to the 4390 plus the 95 on the bank? Does 95 get added to the 4390, or is the bank included in the 4390 that's part of the DPW that's being filled and altered?
I'd have to ask.
Because this new bank information
Good
just came up tonight, as far as we're concerned. You guys knew about it, of course, before tonight, but that's the first we heard of it.
At the time of the initial survey of the property, we were not aware that there was a bank associated with the, what looked to us to be a drainage ditch. It's very shallow. I didn't personally see it. I don't think our surveyors picked up on it. It's in a very thick area of the site. The vegetation is very thick there. So the determination of the BVW impact is inclusive of that 95 linear feet of bank. So there's no additional area that comes into play because of the linear footage of the bank. So the linear footage of the bank is an additional element, and Matt's absolutely right that it needs to be written into the form, but there's no additional BVW impact. So the 4390 is the number because there's not a topographic change that happens with the bank.
If I may, so it's a distinction.
Is it the culvert outlet with the outlet from the culvert?
Yeah, when you come out of the culvert, there's,
BVW side.
on the BVW, there's a very shallow rise, little bank. For lack of a better term, call it like a little natural levee.
Yep.
But it's not easy to see, and it's very small. It's very narrow. Like Kyle said earlier, it's maybe 4 plus or minus inches high, and it's probably not much wider than that.
So to put it in terms that what you're looking for, so if that area was flagged as being the edge of the wetland before, the only thing is that now instead of calling that an edge of a wetland, we're now saying that there's bank.
Right.
So the primary thing that needs to happen is a different box needs to be checked on the notice of intent, and it needs to be made sure that it's written up in the narrative of the notice of intent, but it doesn't have an effect on what 4390 is. It's not, because the bank is there, it doesn't double count or anything like that. It's just that this area that we were calling flagged has been re-identified as bank. So it just needs to be noted that it's a bank.
Correct.
The banks are actually cutting out into the BVW, and it continues beyond our limit of disturbance, but doesn't get any bigger. It's only getting smaller, and it's fingering out into kind of nothing.
So the second part of that doesn't does require any consideration for the replication area, if that's the correct term. Does the bank need to be replicated? It's minor, so you forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, my opinion would be it's insignificant.
Okay.
There are places where it isn't, obviously, on some rivers and streams.
Right.
But in this case, it's negligible.
When you go to the last one of the, I'm going to keep falling back on the same question. still it's an S, of course, because the language is right there. And you can, it's open to determine, this is the 1053C, the same exact language, the construction and maintenance of new roadway or driveway, minimum legal traffic width acceptable to the planning board. So when you write up your certificate, your order of conditions, do you intend to write that language verbatim? Because that's the requirement that the limited project is basically complying with, and include the language that says acceptable to the planning board to your decision.
I assume what we would state is that it meets the status of a limited project under 10.583E and 10.583T, because those are the two
Right.
ways.
Well, you know,
So implicit in it meets 10.583E is that it includes the items that are in that paragraph.
okay. And it's still the opinion of this board that you will need to get some kind of a letter from the planning board or something that says it's acceptable to us.
Well, so first off, per the discussion before, what the implication of this paragraph is not so much that the planning board signs off on a minimal width, is that it meets a minimal width that's acceptable. So if the planning board has standards for what's acceptable to the planning board, and as long as it meets those standards,
Right.
that's what makes it acceptable.
But are you assuming that you know those standards, or that typically you would ask the board to write you a letter that says it does meet our standards and therefore it's acceptable to our board?
Well, if I
Or are you just
recall,
gonna
we
say-
actually got a letter from the enforcement officer for the
That
zoning
was,
and planning board, who stated that it didn't have any requirement to go before planning board.
well, it said that was for site plan review. This doesn't refer to site plan approval, it refers to an acceptable standard.
But there is no roadway being constructed that would put it under this
It says
planning board
driveway.
jurisdiction.
So it's defined as a driveway,
And the
So-
planning board doesn't have any definition, any standards for driveway.
and that was my question, was it defined as a roadway or defined as a driveway? Yeah.
I mean, most residential driveways, they'll give you usually a 12-foot minimum width,
Mhm.
but
Just-
with shoulders, so we'd get to the 16 feet one way or the other. But in this case, 16 feet is really the minimum we need.
I guess what's the
Well,
point, Ken? Are you looking for a wider road?
No, I'm looking for the fact that it's really, really obvious that the whole project, whether it can be built or not built as a limited project in an ACEC, is based on 1053E, and the fact that it has this language in here that says, I'll ask Matt if he has an opinion, maybe he has no opinion, but I would just think that somewhere along the line, to be compliant with that requirement, that our planning board would at least have to write a letter and say, we agree that it's acceptable to the planning board.
Well, to be clear, Matt actually identified that it falls under limited project status in two ways.
I know that.
And so the other way, which is as a new access roadway or existing roadway to transport equipment to a renewable energy project site, doesn't have any width included.
Exactly. So let me ask the applicant, which of the accepted limited projects that are available to you, item E under 1053E or item T under 1053T, of the limited projects have you applied for and are you going to stick with?
We applied under E, and we do not believe that there's any requirement that the planning board sign off on this. And that is, it'd be very unusual to build into this board, into a conservation commission jurisdiction, a requirement that another board approve what this commission is ruling.
Oh, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying.
And that is what you're saying, and that's not a requirement.
So we do lots of applications where folks come to us and they come to us with a roadway. Take Crabtree. They come to us with a roadway for Crabtree and they represent to us what they're planning to build. At that point, that applicant is responsible to go to the planning board to take care of any planning or zoning issues, right? Right? So the applicant is the one who has made the determination of what is the requirement under the law. In this particular case, the applicant has determined that it doesn't have to go back before a planning board. They have a driveway/access path that is within the standards that the town has accepted. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't know that we would even get a letter if we said to the planning board, what's an acceptable roadway for you?
It was a driveway, but either way. The main point I was trying to make is because of the very, very limited opportunity that they have under a limited project in an ACEC, it rises to a different level of checks and balances. And I think Matt will agree with that. It basically says you can't do it unless you comply with this piece right here.
Right,
So
if
since
you-
it's in black and white, it says it must be of a practical width acceptable to the planning board. I would think the planning board just has to write a note that says, we agree that it's a practical width or whatever it applies, and there it is. Otherwise, how do you?
Can I add a little? Just a little clarification, having had situations like this before. In many towns, planning boards have standards for both roadways, driveways, how many houses will be accessed, is there a cul-de-sac, or they have standards for all those things. And what the language anticipates is that not requiring that a planning board sign off or offer any
Okay.
approval, but rather that whatever is approved by the Concom meets whatever minimum standards, if they exist, that the planning board has. In this case, they don't, if I understood, they don't have any standard for a driveway.
No, and they would not
So-
exert that unless they had jurisdiction over this project.
So unless the Concom, I mean, there's nothing to prevent the Conservation Commission from turning around, going to the planning board and say, we'd like your opinion on this. Can you offer that to us? But there's also nothing requiring that as well, because there are no existing standards for driveway.
Did you folks mention there's a meeting coming up?
No, it's a meeting of the ZBA. We would object to doing that. We just don't feel that there's a requirement to go to the planning board. 16-foot driveway with 2-foot shoulders is an NFPA requirement. That's the minimum for access to a site like this that the NFPA requires. So, and they typically will govern planning boards and everybody else. And the fire chief says that's what he wants. Or when the NFPA requires it, then that's what we're doing. Believe me, we kept this to the minimum width. And the important part of this is not as acceptable to the planning board. That's kind of an afterthought. The real part of it that you pay attention to is a driveway of minimum legal and practical width. And that's basically what we've got, is a driveway of minimum legal and practical width. If we could have made it narrower and gotten away with it, it would have made our lives easier, would have made things much simpler, but we can't.
So I don't know if it answers your
Fire truck
question.
get down.
I'm done with that, thank you. Just one other question for Matt, if you don't mind. And as you review the drawings and whatnot, as we happen to be right next to the project, and it's a fairly complex construction project in its nature because of the amount of cutting and filling and earth that has to be moved. And the 4390, I'm concluding, Kyle, is right on the edge of the work line. In other words, you're saying the work line is going to be right there, the hay bale line, the snow fence line, etc. Does everybody feel comfortable that there's no chance that 4390 is going to become a bigger number? That the project it won't become a bigger fill? That it's just it's just more complicated. That there might be a situation where 4390 needs to be managed very closely to not increase the amount of filling on a situation like today. For instance, we had this rain that we had right now.
Right.
What would happen to that hay bale line? What would happen to the whole project? I know it's just construction, but
I guess,
since it is a tight number is what I'm getting at, and the line
Yes.
is so tight
And
in
they-
construction.
and they have retaining wall they're going to construct with some erosion and sedimentation controls as well. Can anybody guarantee that there wouldn't be a mistake? Nobody can guarantee that. Hence my suggestion or recommendation to retain the services of an independent monitor
Right.
for the project, eyes and ears out there in the different phases to make sure that there aren't any mistakes and that something doesn't wander over farther than it ought to be. But in the plans, they've got all of the work areas very specifically delimited on the ground, and there's going to be features out there which will say, this is the edge of work, the edge of disturbance, you don't go beyond this. Typically, sometimes there are meetings before construction starts with contractors and others to make sure they understand limits of work, other conditions that apply in an order of conditions, so that there aren't, or to minimize the risk of a mistake. When you get rain like this, somebody typically would be monitoring the weather. You'd be going out beforehand and checking all of your erosion and sedimentation controls. Make sure everything is in order and maintained properly. Do any bales need to be replaced? Does silt fence need to be fixed up? Whatever it happens to be. Again, to minimize what might happen. When the rain's done, you go back out and you do it again. You inspect after a deluge like we just had. So those are the sorts of things that can be put in as a condition of an order of conditions. There's a couple of different possibilities to minimize the risk of a problem. You can't guarantee that it will be eliminated 100%, but there are many things you can do to greatly reduce it.
One of the ways that we can work is through a condition that requires that we lay out the project, that it's well laid out and surveyed ahead of time, so that during construction, there's no question about where the lines are, where the work is going to happen. So clearing is done within a very defined area. The cutting is done within a very defined area, so that we're not nudging beyond that space that's supposed to happen. And to Matt's point, several other projects in town have utilized independent monitor. You've seen Dishang here many times. Dishang, in fact, I was kind of hoping to reach out to him by email and ask him if he was going to swing through tomorrow at the Willows and see how they fared, and also over at Crabtree, because he's doing both of those projects. Those would be good places to look tomorrow, and if this project was underway, that would be another good place to look and walk around. So undoubtedly we'll have there'll be some bales that were inundated in some places where things happen, but as long as we stay on top of it, that's the best way to manage those things. So I think in this case, two of the things that I marked down as we were going through this before, and I wrote them back down again, is staking of the project, and part of that would be a discussion about how that staking happens, and then the second would be a MOP for construction. So a MOP is a method of procedure, and the method of procedure is, before I do this, what impact does that have? What order do we do the project in? So that we minimize the impact on the project, so that we're doing our best to control it as we go through step by step.
We haven't voted on the project yet.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that a condition on that project would be a method of procedure.
Right.
Right. So those would be ways that you could control any project that was working in such a sensitive area.
And we certainly have no objection to that oversight. We'd welcome it.
I mean, I'll say in looking at the plans, everything was very well drawn out about where limits of disturbance and where no disturbance. Those things are very clearly spelled out on the plans, and as long as that's transferred to the ground, I think that would cover a good deal of it.
In your professional opinion, based on the way the project is laid out, is that doable?
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's doable.
You don't see any issues?
No, if I'd seen issues, I would have raised
You
it
would
in
have
my
raised them.
report. No, as long as that's all, if there was a way to just pick up the plan and put it on the ground, well, there really is. And kind of like you could trace a pencil over it and all of a sudden it was all there on the ground. But there is a way to do it surveying. And again, as long as it's all of that's maintained and inspected, and there are other precautions that we talked about earlier, then yes, it's doable.
Where do utility poles go?
Utility poles, I think they're going to have a couple right at the outer edge of that.
Because they're uphill, right? From the
They go right through
BBW.
the brush.
It's on the plans, they'll be on the side, just off the shoulder.
On the upside?
It'll cross over at some point, but it depends on exactly which pole the connections come in on.
Right,
But
right,
There'll
right.
be a pole on the south side, it'll cross over, because as the road goes down and further up the line, it'll cross back over.
Are you asking a question of where the utility comes from the street? Are you asking how many poles go down the driveway?
No, I mean, if, utility poles, you can't have trees around utility poles, right?
It's right around
Yeah,
the
okay.
driveway, so
Right, okay.
So it's not a separate run through the area. It's
correct.
coincident to the driveway.
It says it's on.
And then it's underground from there?
It's not underground.
It's not underground.
At the solar array, it goes underground.
Oh, okay, so down the driveway, there'll be utility poles along,
Yes.
all along the driveway? And there's no way to get it underground?
Well,
I'm
we
just
have-
curious.
I mean, is
No,
there?
we have that, yeah.
I didn't see that in the
No,
plan.
so
It was on the plan.
It was on the plan?
I'm trying to remember, what are the boxes? You have the tree boxes that
Two
are,
box filters, yeah.
right, tree box filters, and then there are other filtration devices under the roadway in a
Some
couple places.
Yeah.
No.
So,
Yeah, I know,
Yeah, the
I remember.
intention was to keep it above ground. so
Above
not
ground.
mix it with that, it's just getting too, we
Okay.
don't want to make it any more difficult.
Too busy.
It has to be, yeah.
Yes, Ken.
At the beginning of the discussion, Matt mentioned, the two qualifiers for a limited project. He used the language residential access road. I'm not sure, but you're referring to the same.
It's the same, it's the
Section.
same.
But the word residential is the one I'm interested in. So that doesn't mention anything about residential in the 1053E, I don't believe.
No, it does not. And that E has been around for a very long time as a limited project type. And some, I think, as I said, let's see, threw that in
Well,
here.
just to be clear, are you
Well,
arguing
the
because
point
you
is
used the
that
word
we're not-
residential?
Well, the point right now is that we're talking about, we're not talking about anything about near Solar 2, which is can be called what it is, it's certainly not a residential project. It's all we have is Air Solar 2. We don't have anything else but Air Solar 2.
I think it's called residential just because it's been used frequently for residential purposes, but it's not.
That's really all I'm saying is that the E has been used for, as I list here, residential purposes, industrial, commercial subdivisions. It's just a general, it's a general access road or driveway. There we go.
I guess the other way to look at it is it doesn't exclude. So for instance,
Right, I get it.
3E doesn't say residential, not commercial, or commercial, not residential.
I didn't have, none of having a report, I didn't know the
Yeah.
detail that you had added on, but I heard the word residential, so.
Yeah, no, it doesn't qualify it in any way.
Gentleman in the back?
Yes, to piggyback, to piggyback on Mr. Daniels' point a while back, you mentioned the area being filled as 4390, and that also being what you define as the impact area. So, I have a naive question: is if the impact area and the fill area are the same, how are you getting that fill in and the trucks out and filling the same exact square footage at the same time? Sounds like maybe a stupid question, but you're very close to that 5,000 number. So if you have to bring, I don't know how many tons of fill you're bringing in to fill what you're filling, but I'm guessing you have to impact an area outside of that 4390 to get there.
We're not allowed to impact an area outside the 4390 within the wetlands.
Yeah, maybe there's a misperception of the limit of the wetland line and the buffer line that goes around the wetlands.
Would you be so kind as to hold the plan up? Let's start with so to your point, Captain, it's a great question. To your point, could we start with what is the limit of work and then work backwards to what the wetland line is, please?
So it's, yeah, come on up.
Thank you.
So, here we are out at Washington Street.
Yep.
Your side or the far side? Okay. So again, I'm using red at the same time, but the BBW line is right here. And it continues on this way, and this
No,
is
I-
where replication area is taking place here. It continues along here, and is where more replication is taking place over there. So, outside of this area is not BBW, or not the wetland area.
And that's where the dump trailers are gonna come in?
No, dump trailers.
Within
No, but I mean,
this
I'm
area,
assuming they're coming in here to dump in,
yeah, in the plan, we identified that there's gonna have to be,
Yeah.
with the driveway permit, the DPW, the contractor is gonna have to come up with a traffic management plan to figure out how it is, by his means and methods. We're just the engineers, and Ken, you've worked in development before, right? So you understand there are means and methods involved with the contractor doing the work to actually build something. We can't tell him how to build it, we can design it on the ground, but we can't tell him how to do it.
I think
He's gotta
there's
come
both
up,
of it.
pardon?
I think there's, well, I'm,
We can tell him what he has to come up with, and where he can impact and where they can't impact. But we're not gonna tell him, dump your dirt here, and you need this size bulldozer, and you need this size
understand,
excavator.
I
No, we
understand.
don't give him that,
I
that's means
understand.
and
I
methods, we
understand.
don't get into that.
And nothing to do with what happens on the roadway. So those are huge liability issues. So the contractor will be responsible to work with the DPW and the police department to figure out how access would happen. When you've got a project like this one on a busy road on a corner, the engineers don't design that plan, but they do design what the road cut is, and then the contractor fills in the details of how he does the job.
to a degree, that goes back to my definition of the impact area. You know, these trailers, dump trucks, whatever we're using to fill this area, they're exiting the same place that they're entering, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
They're going, I'm assuming they're gonna take a right, whatever, but that's a downslope where everything coming off of those vehicles after driving through a pretty significant construction-filled site, the residue, the debris from those trucks, that road is going to be impacted, and further downstream is the storm drain that goes back into the wetlands.
Right.
Is that considered part of the impact area?
Well,
There are erosion controls at the perimeter.
I'm talking about
This
the
down-
road though, when the truck
the
gets
road
back
here?
out on, when the truck gets back out on the road,
Yeah.
everything that comes off that truck is coming down this road.
Well, that's
into
why
the storm
there's
drain.
this stone, big stone.
But the trucks, these trucks are gonna be coming down here, that entire
Right,
road,
this stone's
not gonna
beyond,
wash
beyond
it.
here.
but this stone pad is intended to take a lot of the dirt off of the wheels of the truck.
It's called a
Leave
rumble
it on the
strip.
site, so
Yeah.
it doesn't get out into the street. They'll also probably have requirements from DPW to sweep this on a regular basis, so you can't build up, they're not allowed to build up residue on the road like that. I mean, they may get some there, but they're gonna have to come
Well,
and
it's-
sweep it.
That was just my question, is that the difference between the impact area and the
And
filled
the
area?
DPW may
My assumption
also,
is the impact area is much larger than the 4390.
well, no, and
Because of the
DPW,
tracking of dirt
Yes.
onto the road.
Excuse my naivete.
No. And so
That's-
part of what will happen is you've seen those, lately they're yellow. In the old days, we used to just use a piece of Marafi fabric. So you'd pull the drain cover out, you put Marafi fabric in, you put the drain cover back in. And then every couple of days, you'd have to pull that out and throw the Marafi away and put a new one in. And now you've seen them, they're bright yellow. And so they'll lift that cover out and they'll put a bright yellow filter
it's
sock
actually
in there.
back, it sits
Yeah,
inside
sits
the
right down
tank.
underneath, and then they'll close that off. And that's one of the ways that they reduce the impacts from those trucks coming out. So typically what happens is the trucks come out, and you're absolutely right, there's no way to keep them 100% clean. So what ends up happening is they go over the rumble strip, they knock the majority of the material off, they come out in the street, let's say it's raining that day, and the water washes down and it takes some of that dirt and it goes in that filter bag that's in the,
Or gets beyond it into the road and goes down into the wetlands.
well, hopefully it goes into the storm drain where it's supposed to go, because that's usually where it happens. It stops at the storm drain. The contractor then, depending upon what his work is with the DPW, comes in and sweeps after or before those events to keep a handle on the maximum amount of material that ends up in the road. And the last thing that's most important to know is that whether it's this project or any other project we have, if we come down 2 days from now and there was a truck and for whatever reason something happened and a lot of material ended up in the street and it ends up down in the storm drain and it ends up down below, the contractor then cleans that up. That's how that works. And sometimes it's with shovels by hand and sometimes it's with a machine, but they clean it up. And so you're right, there's always a chance that something's going to happen. But there's a great deal of oversight on any project like this. I'm sure you'll have your eyes open. I'm sure Ken will have his eyes open. And if something happens on the project that's becoming a problem, we'll work together with the DPW and the contractor to make sure it's not happening.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
The poles, the utility poles, are they, do we know where they're going to be?
Sit right down.
We don't know exactly where they're going to be. We have an idea that the spacing is something around 150 feet. So we place them, where they need to be. We don't want them to be, they can't be very far away from the road. And on this first part, this is down at the bottom of the hill. That's the height. There, I have them schematically placed on the plans. So where exactly they'll be, I can't tell you. They're gonna be adjacent to the road. The road is, as close to the property line as this, so it's, it varies, of course.
Kyle, if I may, that's National Grid's call.
It is ultimately National Grid's call. We have a layout that we have to show just so that we can see that there is a space for them to go. We can't control where National Grid puts them.
Understand. Does this board have any authority to require underground?
No, so there's two ways to look at that. So the first way to look at that is there are large portions of the project that aren't jurisdictional. And so in those parts of the project that aren't jurisdictional, we don't have any ability to require anything at all. The second part of it is that in a lot of these circumstances, I'd almost rather have overhead than underground.
Unless you live next door.
But what I mean is that from a safety perspective, their ability to service the lines and take care of the project with the overhead is no different than the overhead out on the street.
I respectfully disagree. I mean, there's underground lines all over.
You create a case, and
It's a different set of requirements, but it's,
And from the standpoint of the solar developer, that's what they do. They want them overhead, they run the lines overhead. That's what we've proposed. And I think the less we're in the ground in this area, the better off we are.
you put a water line in, you put a sewer line.
We are.
There's really no comparison between the 5 feet cover and the water line.
You're already-
2.5
One
foot
more
cover.
thing you've
You're
got to
already
do
It's
is
a
one
cost,
more.
it's a cost.
It's a cost,
It's
but it's
basically
also
a
one
cost.
more complication that we'd like to avoid. if we can
It's
do it.
basically a cost. Is it an 8-inch water line? Something like that?
No.
6-inch?
so will there be a fire hydrant down there?
Well, those details have to be worked out with DPW, but that is the plan. There will be a hydrant just after the culvert crossing,
There won't be anything further down where the array is?
not for water.
Yeah, there's no reason to.
The array doesn't need any water.
And if there's something, one of the electrical things short out or
They don't
something,
want
the fire department.
And plowing, and is this plowed?
Sure, it'll have to be plowed, yeah, they need to get in there once a month to see it. Especially when you get the residential properties, and obviously it'll be plowed. From the solar perspective, yeah.
So from the other project, just as an idea, so I know the other project is wrapping up. Is it a monthly inspection of the project, of
Typically, yeah,
the property?
typically it's a monthly.
Okay,
Somebody with a pickup truck will go out there and take a look at it.
so it would be kept plowed regularly?
Right.
By the solar company?
Yeah.
Yes,
Or whoever they arrange.
because it won't be the town. This, again, like we were talking before, any roadway like this one is not being accepted or taken over by the town. Does that make sense?
It does, but what happens if something happens to the solar company?
No, that's the risk.
I still own the land.
You mean if the folks who own the solar array go out of business, or?
Yeah, if the solar company goes out of business, who's responsible for,
Well, even if the solar company, for some reason, went out of business, first of all, it wouldn't be the solar company, because usually the companies that build these then sell to an investor. In this case, actually, I think they're gonna hold it, but a lot of times, and it may be National Grid, sometimes it's all the National Grid, but in any case, the solar company has an investment there, and so if for some reason they go out of business, that's an asset that's generating money on a regular basis. So somebody's going to step in and take over their assets and continue to operate.
I think the other way to look at it too is that, let's say that the company that owned it went out of business, then probably the worst thing that would happen is there'd be a lack of activity on the site as opposed to more activity.
Well, I'd be concerned with both, quite honestly.
Kevin.
Lack of activity is you've got these panels producing power with nobody maintaining it. A lot of power being produced.
If I may, that's beyond the jurisdiction of what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, and I knew it was, I'm sorry.
I appreciate your comments about the access roadway. So the roadway is going to be accessed as long as there's a need to go back there. And so that's my view of it. If there was no need to go back there, then you wouldn't have to worry about plowing your access. So if that makes sense.
I'd like to voice my thanks to the Conservation Commission for the time you guys have put in. We know it's a complicated project, we've known it since the beginning. I think you'd appreciate from the folks that are here tonight and the questions that we have, we not only think the project is, really tricky because of the 4390 and the size and whatnot, but the construction sequence is really, very difficult to manage. So I think I want to expand a little on Kevin's point that I'm concerned with the amount of clearing, of course, as we all are, from Mr. Madigan, myself, anyone who's going to look over the clearing. And just to build a project and to use the amount of cuts and fills for that entrance driveway involves a lot of clearing. And we'd be very concerned and very much on your team if you could limit that clearing as much as possible.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it is my land, and if I want to cut a tree, I can unless it's in the wetland.
It's not your land right there. It's a
No,
wildwood property.
it's under agreement with the Wilders, or we wouldn't be doing it.
But I'm telling you right now, it's.
What I'm telling you also is that it's going to be our land. We're providing a 50-foot buffer from conversations we had earlier that we don't have to do. We did. But if I want to cut a tree on my land, I'm going to cut it.
You can't cut it in a buffer zone without.
That's what I just said, unless it's in a wetland. I said that.
The whole
If
project.
it's in a wetland, I can't cut it, but anywhere else, I can cut those trees.
I agree.
And we're also doing the best that we can to keep the neighbors happy.
No, I agree.
Okay.
I'm just saying that,
And we're minimizing the amount of cutting. We can't put this in with any less unless we have the entire thing in a 20-foot wall.
I appreciate the work. Thank you. Just a final comment. That's all.
I think the most important thing to think about going forward is the Conservation Commission was very concerned, as I think we should be, about all the different aspects of the project. I personally am very thankful to Matt and his team for their review of this, and I assume team is you, but it just sounds much better.
My associates.
Your associates. I didn't see the dog, but I bet there is one.
There is.
We appreciate everything Matt did to go and walk through this. This isn't the kind of thing that we do on an everyday basis. Understanding the qualifications of the limited project was hugely important for understanding the project. And I hope that you feel comfortable that we've walked through what we know and what we needed to know in order to get to this point. I personally, until we walk through it with Matt's professional judgment, and this is no slight on GPR, but until we walked through it and Matt literally lined it out for us piece by piece, I wasn't very comfortable. It makes sense at this point that the project meets the requirements of the state. So, like many of the other projects that we do, the question is, does it fit within the guidelines to be done? And once it fits within the guidelines to be done, then it's about operation. So, from that point on, it's about discussing specifically how we're going to mark off where the areas that can be cut versus the areas that can't be cut. Where's the roadway going to be? What will be the observation of that project? Would an independent person be, popping in, once a week, every 2 weeks to check on it? And what are the qualifications of that person? And so those are the most important things to me at this point, knowing what we know about the project, and then it meets the state standards and is possible under the state standards. So,
Thank you.
I appreciate your questions and comments, and I appreciate Matt's efforts.
I have one question.
Please do.
Just based on your evaluation of it as habitat, ACEC and all that, do you see any impact from Mr. Bergen's question about the above ground versus underground poles?
Power.
Utility poles.
Underground poles are very hard to do.
But, I mean, from a,
In this case, I don't, because they're going to be right along the roadway, so there's no additional clearing. You're not going through forest or undisturbed areas to put a line in. As the chairman said, it's coincident with the driveway. So there's no, if you will, there's no additional alteration or cutting or anything that goes along with it. Visually, yes, there's an issue there, for sure. But not in terms of the interests of the act and so forth.
I think the majority of the cutting comes from the solar array,
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
and that impacts. I mean, that's not our jurisdiction, but it impacts ACEC nonetheless.
We've got to cut trees to make sure they're not anywhere near the lines and the poles, so there's gonna have to be a clearing all the way out to the road, I'm assuming.
Well, so one of the things so did you define the limit of work when you guys were talking?
Well, just the area of the crossing, but, so, the limit of work is this thicker line that's down here represents that limit of work, and then it goes to a thinner, heavy dark line that comes out and runs right along the high tension power lines, so that there's no shading from any of those trees, and then it comes back, and that's where the 50-foot area was that Calvin was talking about, and then it stops over here.
Well, no, I'm talking about the poles leading from there out to Groton Road. Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
I apologize. The poles that are leading from your solar array out to the road. There's going to be poles with wires on them, and the trees around them are going to have to come down.
Not necessarily.
There's enough clearing for the road
I mean,
because of
due respect-
slopes and so on, that it's, I mean, there's gonna have to be trimming of trees, certainly.
Yeah.
But, and again, I don't have control over this from National Grid, and if National Grid comes in and they wanna cut more trees that are within the jurisdiction of the Concom, they're gonna have to come to Concom to get those extra trees cut.
Do we know the height or anything of the poles or the lines? Or?
I have no idea what that'll be, standard height, I don't know.
They're about 30 feet on the other project. So if you were down on Rosewood, so just as an example, so down on Rosewood, the original plan was to come in and go straight in overhead. And we ended up having to kick over a little bit to make some more space. And part of that involved a revisit from the applicant to come in and talk to us about the additional 2 trees that they cut in that area. And it wasn't a quick decision. We actually went out and walked the project and figured out that it made sense. The 2 trees that were there were really incidental. They weren't affecting anything or anyone. And that was part of the decision that we had. So once the limit of work is defined on the project, that's the limit of work. If other work has to happen beyond that project and it's jurisdictional, then the applicant comes back to us and says, we've run into these changes, whether it's National Grid or sometimes, we all hate to use it out loud, but we hit ledge. Or something happens that causes them to say, you know what, we'd like to shift or do this to accommodate something we found on site. So the intention is to develop a plan that meets the state standards under the Wetland Protection Act. In this case, there were several other standards that had to be applied. And then once that plan is created, it's then working to the plan. So if there's a limit of work on the plan, that's the limit of work.
That line gets staked in the field, and it is wherever it is. It goes through the middle of a tree. There's a discussion had about that tree and how that gets adjusted. It's the limit of work is the limit of work. Based on the topographic survey, this is the extent that we need to tie out the grades from the road the proper way. movement, and there's no additional clearing shown on that plan for wayward poles that slide way out from the roadway.
You may want to, in your conditions, use the words survey located for the limit of work, so you're specifying that it's done by.
That was my intention. In fact, based on our walk through there, it may even make sense in some of the more sensitive areas to use construction snow fence in those areas so that there's no question about where the limit of work is. In that way, there's no chance for folks to stray. We don't want them to stray either. And I don't think anyone wants the guys who are working to make a mistake. So that's one of the other ways that we control that. All right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. So at this point, we've reviewed the application. We've discussed the line that was established through the ANRAD for the BVW. We've discussed the limited project and what specific rules or interpretations were necessary for the design. And we have come to the point where we have a design in front of us that is plausible under limited project through ACEC and through the state. Anybody have any further comments? Jess? Sorry.
Start with Joy.
Oh.
Fine.
Will a new NOI be written up?
We'll amend the NOI to include the bank.
Is that it? Was that it? Was that it on the amendments? I thought there was more. No?
Well, we talked about the only thing that needed to check an additional box
Right.
and list the link to the bank.
And discuss it in the narrative.
Any of the other, so potentially, just so that we cross every I and dot every T, we could change the language in your alternatives analysis regarding the 4390 square feet and the 5,000
Yep, under B.
under B.
Sure, I can do that.
There's no MIPA review required?
No, there's no state permit.
There's no state permit? And there's no state funding
No.
that was involved at all?
No.
Nothing,
That's over.
that's over. No, I was just making sure.
That was over in a year that ended in 6.
Yeah. Oh, that state funding ended in 2006?
Well,
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure that was the big part of it. I don't think it was renewed, correct?
Some of it has
Some of
been,
it.
some of it's not. Yeah, there's still an SREC program
Yeah.
that's still going, but it's not nearly what it used to be. But that's been adjudicated. That's not considered state funding
The way it was defined before.
Yeah, kicking to there. No. And yeah, so when that, so I'll talk about the layout. Instead of saying did stay well below 5,000, I'll just say did stay below 5,000.
Yeah, take out the optimism. Okay, so we covered the alternatives analysis, and we have a copy of the habitat evaluation. I did look through this briefly. I don't know if anybody else had any other comments on it. Did you have
I was
anything?
disappointed there weren't cavities in trees.
Well, again, remember, it's just the 4390, it's just the affected
Yeah.
BVW that, it's an oddity of the law, but that's all it requires to be evaluated.
Did you have anything further on it?
No, I don't think I do.
If we approve, which we haven't voted on yet, but for the outside monitor, could we establish in our order of conditions certain criteria for, okay, set up the survey line,
Mhm.
and that gets independently verified by an outside monitor, and various points of check-in with the person. to avoid mistakes we've had at several sites lately, you know, and avoid future restoration necessities.
Yes.
I'd be more comfortable, given the tightness of the 4390, as Ken has pointed out.
So my feeling was to bring it up as items that would come up under an order would include the independent monitor, providing a method of procedure that has to be agreed upon so that we can go over what the timing is going to be. As an example, several projects in town have happened where we talk about whatever you do, don't pave the roads until you've got all your stormwater in, and of course they pave the roads because that's how you get the bank money. And then afterwards, we're dealing with the fact that it's a mess. And we said don't do that. They said, well, it's the only way we can make our bank money. So it would be great to go over the method of procedure and make sure that we cover all those first, and then also discuss the language for an operations and maintenance plan that would clearly stipulate that all maintenance of the road will fall back on the solar field, the owner of that property, with the intention again that the solar field will be more continuous than potential folks owning houses.
Right, I understand.
Did you have any others that you had concerns about?
Not the moment.
Okay. Well, I think this is the moment.
Well, that's a question I noticed. George?
Did you have any thoughts you wanted to spell out?
No, I'm concerned with the O&M plan. So I just wanted to cover that.
So for folks who aren't aware, so when you have stormwater structures, the point of a stormwater structure is that stormwater flows in and that solids fall out, and then that the water then goes out back into the wetlands in a reduced flow so that it has less velocity. And the idea is that any solids or anything that gets picked up off a road ends up in the stormwater. Those items have to be maintained. Somebody has to clean them out. And so the operations and maintenance plan would be important to making sure that the system works going forward. So here in town, I don't know if anybody remembers, it was about 2 years ago. If you're heading out on 2A, just before you drop down, there's the condominiums on the right, and they were in there and they dug out that detention basin in the front because it had so much material that had built up in it. They were in there with a backhoe scraping out material. That's how it's supposed to work. Looks terrible, but that's how it's supposed to work. So it collected material and they pulled it back out. And in this case, the operation and maintenance plan would have a methodology for how that was done in the future. So I concur. You're all set.
Well said. I mean, I did have concerns about this project, especially when it's in an ACEC and habitat, but Matt's analysis and Oxbow's put it in a different light.
For the record, I would say that I was very concerned about what's going on with the filling that's necessary. However, what's crucial is that we have a good design and that we meet the state's criteria. That's the most important part. The state allows for projects to happen in locations like this if they're done properly. The first step of that is a design that meets those state criteria, and the second part is implementing the design properly. So I feel that if we stay on top of it and we utilize some of the items we've just talked about with an independent monitor, a mop for construction, and follow-up, that we can make sure that the project goes properly. So unless there's anything further, I would entertain a motion to approve and issue an order of conditions for DEP file number 100-043 with the order of conditions to be discussed.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
Who's going to prepare it?
The order of conditions? We happen to have a young lady starting potentially on Tuesday. For those who are unaware, our conservation administrator resigned, and we respect his wishes and wish him the best. We are bringing in an outside consultant from another engineering company who can work for us 2 days a week to maintain paperwork and make sure that we don't fall behind notices and answer residents' issues.
Good.
so we should be just fine. Actual contentment, I think is all set, because we're gonna discuss it next. So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion?
I'm still concerned about that northern wetland that was not looked at.
Oh, it was looked at. We
It was
absolutely
looked
had. We told our wetland consultant specifically to go there and look at it and flag it.
And the rest of the story is that there are plants there, and there is a fair amount of drainage that ends up there. But, you know, the geology of this area is that it's a big sand pile. So basically, whatever water gets there seeps out. It's all sand, and so it doesn't meet the soils criteria for that to be a wetland.
And are you 100 feet from the flagging?
There's no flag.
There's no flagging, there's nothing to
You
flag.
said
There's
that
no
they,
wetlands.
you said that they flagged it.
No, we told him to flag it. He went out there and came back and said, there's nothing to flag, it's not a wetland. It doesn't meet.
It doesn't meet the criteria.
So let's start from the
for-
beginning. Was it Oxbow?
No, it was the same, Dave Crossman, the same person that flagged the issue.
Right, I'm sorry, Crossman.
Yeah. Yeah. And he went up and looked at it and said, it's not a BBW.
Have you worked
Yeah,
with?
I mean, I've been there, I ride the rail trail all the time, and there's a vernal pool very close to, in proximity. I mean,
But I guess the only thing I'd say is, even if it was an isolated land subject to flooding, we're staying out of it and we're staying away from it because there obviously was some value to it. So we didn't propose to fill it or cut trees in it or anything else, so.
I
So
mean,
maybe
it's, yeah.
specifically,
Mhm.
what is the distance between your limit of work and the edge of the unflagged area?
Well, depends on how far into this depression we're talking, and
All right, so let's start there. So the first problem is if it isn't flagged because it isn't a wetland, there's no flag to measure off of.
you know, it's I'm not exactly sure, Mr. Chairman, how to address the question, because I don't know where it is that you're considering this to be. There's a large area.
Yeah, there's a huge depression, so here's the rail
Big
trail.
depression, there's
Yeah.
a smaller depression here
Yeah.
that overflows
Yeah.
into this depression.
Right,
This depression takes water that's coming from the hospital,
right.
from the rail trail, for many acres.
Right.
And from
Right.
Madigan Lane subdivision.
Right.
It comes through the property into here.
Right.
With all that drainage, this never ponds. It's very sandy, very fast.
I disagree with that.
Well,
No, because I've,
maybe it does, but
Yeah,
the soils are very sandy and
yes,
they are fast draining.
yes.
So, you know, what I was told by Dave Crossman was, you know, he saw some plants in here, I guess, I don't know, ferns, maybe something that are, you know, wetland type variety plants,
Okay.
but the soils are not
Are not
wetland
wetland
soils.
soils.
Not hydric soil.
They're not,
Hydric.
yeah, so they don't,
So-
it doesn't meet that criteria. The plants are probably there because there is a lot of water that drains there, but it drains out very quickly. So it's not a wet land, it's a moist land.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, the
So new
curiosity.
criteria we're gonna have to go work with, but
Yeah,
Can I
Matt,
offer a clarification?
please do.
It's not bordering on another body of water, so it can't be BVW.
Right.
Isolated land subject to flooding has nothing to do with the plants growing there. The definition is a depression that stores a quarter-acre of foot volume of water at an average depth of 6 inches. So you have to survey it and do elevation survey to figure out whether a depression meets that standard. So, think of a quarter of an acre of land
Right.
and water pools to 6 inches deep on average, and that potentially becomes isolated land subject to flooding. Doesn't matter what the plants are, that's not the standard. And it doesn't matter what the soils are, that's not the standard.
So stepping back from there, so the first reason it's not jurisdictional is it's not BBW.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that kind of
Mm-hmm.
That kind of takes away the whole first element.
Mm-hmm.
The second element, if it did hold standing water or was an isolated wetland subject to flooding,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a different
Right,
aspect.
right.
I guess the only two things I would say to you is I appreciate Matt's opinion, and I definitely appreciate Dave Crossman's opinion, because having walked many sites with him, he's incredibly conservative. And if he says it is in a wetland, A, because it's not bordering, and B, because it doesn't have hydric soils,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not a wetland.
Mm-hmm.
That's a personal opinion,
Mm-hmm.
but we've done, I can't tell you how many sites with Dave Crossman,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always felt incredibly comfortable the sites we've walked.
But I guess the other point to bring up here is that we stayed away from it because we saw that it potentially had some value as a wooded area, as an area that holds water, and so we stayed purposely away from it. So even if it was isolated land subject to flooding, there's no buffer zone for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we're exceeding
Right.
any requirement, even if it was mapped as that, and we just said, whatever it is, we're staying away from it. So I think we've taken that into account. I think we tried hard to not impact where we didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand your concern, because it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and right. Now I have to stay away from the non-jurisdictional.
Well, we can talk about them all
No,
night, but it just won't,
Yeah.
just doesn't have the effect you're looking for.
I did note that Oxbow, on page 3, they said they reviewed the wetland delineation in the subject area. I agreed that the boundary was accurate within a reasonable margin of error, so that gave me more confidence in
Yeah.
Crossman's flagging.
Would you like to continue the discussion, or are you ready?
No,
Okay, I didn't want to be rude.
no.
All right, so there's a motion on the table. All in favor say aye. Aye. Nay?
Nay.
All right, the motion passes. DEP file number 100-0403. We will issue the order of conditions for review. We will discuss the items that we talked about tonight and entered into the record regarding monitoring and a mop, etc. And we'll pass those items on to the applicant.
Very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
And
I would-
the residents should know they have once it's issued, they'll have an appeal period.
that's right. The next hearing, so our next hearing is July 13th. Obviously, we won't have this prepared for you then. I'm not doing it. I have a job. July 27th is our next hearing, so I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing for DEP file number 100-0403 to July 27th. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
One last thing before we finalize discussion on here. I would entertain a motion to notify the town accountant that the work by WSS out of Merrimack for the peer review is complete and that payment should be proper.
On export,
Sure.
I have an invoice from.
You have the invoice and everything.
Yes.
And I have to obviously do my final as well.
Yes, this is.
That's
the final.
partial.
This is a partial invoice.
So, Matt, I don't remember the total, what the original total was that we agreed upon. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me.
Which has to be slightly amended because of the addition of the wetland, or the wetland.
Right.
Right.
I don't have it here with me, but I'm not sure exactly where we stand, but I think I'm certainly within.
Oh, no, I think you're definitely within. I
Matt's.
just couldn't remember what the total was.
I
Actually,
don't recall.
hey, Cal?
I think it was in the neighborhood of about 50,000.
Yeah, it was 56,000. So
Ouch.
Just wanted to see if he was paying
we were
attention.
just reviewing. So this is Matt's first invoice, and he was just covering a bunch of the parts and pieces that he had done on it, which he was turning in. So the last time we did this, we notified the town administrator. The town administrator notifies the town accountant. I can't remember. Did you pay in advance, or did they
Yes.
bill you?
No, we did pay in advance.
Okay. Do you remember what that total was?
2,500 to start? Does that sound
Well,
right?
I honestly don't remember. I have
I think it was
pulled
2,200
back in my
maybe,
office.
20, something like that. And then I think,
No,
and
that's what I remember it was
there
around
an
2 grand.
additional,
The wildlife habitat.
for, which was
additional
how much, another
500 for the
1,200?
habitat?
1,000, 1,200.
Something like that.
And then Pete sent checks for both those.
And it was all written up in the original documentation,
Right.
so
Right.
all we were trying to do is get our heads wrapped around it. The first invoice was for 900, so we're going to approve this tonight and look forward to Matt's final invoice, which we'll process with the town.
Absolutely.
So,
I'll
okay,
Get that by the end, I'll get that in by the end of the week, you know, just so.
that would be wonderful. There'll be no one there to get it, but that's, no, I'm just kidding.
Then it's off my books.
And we really appreciate Matt responding and turning around as fast as he did.
No, we're really thankful that it all worked out. In fact, it would be great if we saw more of it. So,
Anytime,
Thanks so much.
happy to help.
actually, well, we're not done there.
I have to stand up and stretch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Honey,
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice
Yeah,
to meet
thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle, take care.
Okay, so this is an invoice for $906.59.
Nice to meet you, George. Thank you.
Drive safe.
Yeah, I will.
I would entertain a motion to approve and notify the town administrator to pay $906.59 to WSS.
So moved.
Town administrator or accountant?
I was going to tell the town administrator because I don't know exactly how that works.
Second.
Well, I'll put it this way, I can't go wrong handing it to him.
We'll get to the right place.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Okay. First, you guys ruined date night.
Hey, I wasn't the one who scheduled this initial hearing.
No.
It was your idea.
You guys ruined date night. I thought we'd be out of here at 8:01. All right.
We wouldn't.
I'm really glad that it went the way it went. I feel like this review of the project was hugely helpful. Did you feel comfortable with how it all worked out?
Went very well.
And you, Jess, did you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I made a point of sending a copy of the agenda to Ken Diskin the other day, just because it wasn't our normal meeting day.
I appreciate that.
And I think it's just better all around to make sure we're not doing a Mitch McConnell.
Oh, he just did it behind closed doors. That wasn't even.
Exactly, yeah, just to.
We'd have to shut stuff and then turn the lights out.
I mean, I was sort of hoping that there would, I was hoping.
Is that lit? I can't tell now.
I think it is.
It's hard to say.
Hello.
No, I was just thinking before we moved on. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I was, just because I don't love development, I was hoping there'd be some good reasons in both reports too, but there weren't.
no, in fact, I printed it yesterday and I peeked at it a little bit.
Yeah, I think personally you go by reports and also you go by, you read between the lines in terms of what the rules and the regs are, in terms of, modifications within ACDC.
If they were building a fracking field, then I'd probably have said no, but they're building a solar field and the overall impact of the solar field is so minimal. That's my opinion.
Right, and my argument is that it's a continuous destruction of important bordering vegetative area that may or may not be important for wildlife now, but in the future, may be important. And when it's gone, it's gone.
Well, it depends on whose report you read, because apparently the last one of these hugely detrimental climate change times was about 250 million years ago, and it wiped 97% of the.
Well, we're all doomed.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we are.
Plant's gone.
Oh, basically 80% of the insect species will be gone in the next 100 years.
And not the bad ones.
And not the bad ones, the good ones.
Yeah. No, I did read something the other day too, that we're well into the 6th extinction event.
Right.
And,
That was probably the same article.
right, and that unfortunately it's like a future need of wildlife species is going to be, well, this does contribute to their diminishment, but,
Yeah.
but
The real problem is going to be temperature.
Yeah.
They were saying that the wet bulb temperature, that apparently
Yeah.
that you can only exist for 5 hours.
You can't sweat and cool yourself.
Right, and it was,
It's like there's no heat, cool
You know,
transfer.
we're gonna evolve panting.
no,
No,
we
will.
won't.
We will.
That's the problem.
We will evolve very
won't.
quickly.
No, I don't think we're
Along with
gonna.
our
Panting
dogs.
won't work.
You don't
No,
think so? No.
No,
In
it's-
fact-
It's like, because it'd be like you had a.
You know I'm joking.
Oh, I know.
No, it would be nice. 126 degrees in reality.
Oh, I
And it
thought
wasn't it-
129.
And it wasn't a record.
Mm.
And
Well,
do you know, a few weeks ago, they had to stop flights to, I think, Arizona,
Yeah.
that area, because
the runway was melting?
No,
runways were too
oh,
hot.
no.
Too hot for the tires?
Yeah.
No, it's because when the air is that hot, you
Oh,
can't
there's
get
no
any
lift.
lift.
Yeah, there's no lift.
Remember Bernoulli? You remember
Yeah.
Bernoulli?
Yeah.
Literally.
Temperature, yeah.
So
Lift is temperature.
remember the Bernoulli effect?
Yeah.
Bernoulli, right?
Right.
Yeah. Super
I
exciting.
did not bring it tonight. We have a huge stack tomorrow. So tomorrow, Friday,
Huge stack of what?
well, we have all the public hearings for Pingree Hill,
Yes.
which I'd say we should keep as short as possible because we're gonna do a site walk. And so we can get through, but, we haven't had announcements in ages, but I have
Well,
a few.
we kept saying, do we have any announcements? And we didn't have any.
So there's something from the state as well as the EPA that they're making changes. They're pulling back clean waters.
What?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
have it
from
tomorrow.
the Trump administration?
Yes, they're pulling back regulations, and
Nice.
they
Not
also
lovely.
may be making it difficult for communities to create local bylaws that exceed federal law,
Mm.
as well as enforce existing bylaws. So they have both those printed out.
And the ones that are already done or grandfathered in,
Uh,
they won't be repealed
no,
or
I think
nullified,
they're-
will they?
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Really?
Yeah. So our chairman can read it to the education of everybody. But so there are going to be challenges to.
There are going to be challenges to everything.
Everything.
I guess the important part, and we can discuss this at another time, but right now,
Yeah.
did you hear about in Maryland? Was it? I can't remember if it was Maryland or Delaware. The state attorney general, the Republicans in the state attorney general wrote him a letter and said, please stop doing it. He keeps suing or being part of lawsuits against the Trump administration and some of the changes they're making. And he was a big part of the emolument suit, which once it goes through will obviously be a game changer. But
Mm.
that's a big one. That's for the party that claims to care about what the Constitution says. That's one of the biggest pieces.
Mm.
So you can't, are you familiar with this?
No.
You cannot benefit in your position as president from foreign governments.
Right.
And they're saying that by purposefully hosting these things at his own hotels, he is absolutely going out of the way to benefit himself. And that's not like a maybe gray area. No, they're staying in his hotels, and by definition, he is benefiting himself.
Well,
There's no way around it.
So the state attorney general who's filing these lawsuits, is he also a Republican?
It turns out he is not.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
But so he's being told to stop it, but what he's doing is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
It's
there's
free speech.
a whole bunch of stuff going on, although nothing beats Colbert last night. Let's not get into that right now. Did everybody get to see Colbert from last night?
Was it
No, I saw the night
Trump's
before.
son?
Oh, sweet Francis. It was very funny.
I
If nothing
didn't
else, it was
see
very
it, but
funny.
I can imagine what.
Okay, so number one, we wanted to have our discussion, vote to approve payment, which we took care of, review the personnel issues. So for those who have been keeping up, the town said you can't spend $1,300 a week, and I think we should spend $1,300 a week, primarily because I think the person should come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Thursdays being the late night. Excuse me, I didn't work out the total details with Ms. Curtis, but definitely want that person at our meetings.
Yes.
So would it be an 8-hour day including the meeting?
Including the meeting. Yeah.
Okay. So it would
So-
be late morning to,
Well, no, so it'll be a Tuesday day,
yep.
right? And
Yeah, full day.
whatever it takes on Thursday.
Uh-huh.
In fact, quite frankly, it wouldn't bother me if that person came in for 5 hours and went to a regular job and came back for the meeting.
Oh,
The idea is not to make it life
Mhm.
miserable or difficult for that person. The idea
Right.
is to spread the hours out so that we have
Mhm.
coverage in the office,
Mm-hmm.
so that there's somebody to take emails and phone calls and go visit sites as necessary. If we had somebody tomorrow, the first place they'd be going is down the end of Pleasant Street. Because if there's going to be a site that's a mess tomorrow, then that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Because they dug everything up and it's all dug up down the hill. You can't even get down there.
Was this Riley Jane?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I went down there and found the first one,
Mm.
and the only benefit that we had was, per our discussion with the previous CA, was that their hay bales are not where the hay bales at the limit of work.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they had blowouts here, but here is where the final hay bale line is.
Mm.
So the only question would be, what's the status down the bottom of that hill?
Mhm.
So, okay. So, does anybody have any reason to not use our town funds plus WA funds? You saw the number today in the email?
Mhm.
Mm.
Was it 45? I think it was
49.
49. Okay. So it's 49,000.
49 what?
Thousand.
Soon to go up because we have some money up there that has to get deposited,
I'm sure there's a whole bunch.
about 15.
So we'd be talking about, it's $1,300 and change, call it $400. So we would be looking at $400 per week or $1,600 per month that would come out of WPA funds to fund this person at 2 days a week. My personal opinion was that we communicate to BSC that we would like 2 days a week for at least a month. At the end of the month, we would reconsider with their person how that's working out. If 1 day is enough, then we'll go to 1 day. If we still need to do 2 days, we'll go to 2 days. Or in the dead of summer, I was actually surprised to get applications from Mulaney. I would have figured these would have been in much sooner in the
Oh.
year.
Yeah.
But typically about the end of the year,
Mm.
usually the applications drop off, the amount of the work drops off.
Oh, then the Milcorp as well. The 2 NOIs for Milcorp on Littleton Road too.
That's right.
That's riverfront, so. It's riverfront property.
But yeah, coming in pretty late.
Yeah,
though.
yeah, which,
Which were the Milcorp ones? I don't
On
understand.
Littleton Road, that's,
Did we get those last time?
yeah, I handed those out.
No, I don't. It's not that I don't believe. I just don't. Maybe we didn't look at them because we were so busy.
Yeah, well, we didn't really look at the Pingree Hill ones yet either.
I'm not kidding. Okay, look at
Mm.
your. I mean,
But we did.
we couldn't
did
have walked
contact-
Pingree Hill more times. If there's an application up there, I'm pretty sure I can probably do it from memory.
Right, and we didn't, and we did contact Milcorp to make sure that they were comfortable with being not put on the
Put-
agenda
right,
to
right.
the
So
next one.
where's Milcorp one? What? Off what road?
Littleton Road?
Next to Blue Northern.
Yeah.
two,
Oh.
Yeah. So
Right.
Then it's broken.
The drilled property. Right. Remember that? So at one point, a developer wanted to put a whole bunch of houses up on the other side of the road in Harvard.
oh, on the golf
And so what they
course
did-
side.
They drilled under the water and
Yeah.
popped up on the other side so they could run sewer and
Oh,
connect to
right.
air.
Right,
Which I guess was also still considered even like a year ago. Somebody was
Mhm.
talking about doing it,
Mm.
but they must have abandoned it because now they're going to
Mm.
put houses there, or they'd like to put houses there. Such
Well, I think that, yeah, I'm still confused because it's a riverfront, not a wetland.
well. So the first part we have to check on is what do we? I'm not entirely certain where that. So you've got Bennett's Brook comes through there.
Yeah, it's Bennett's Brook. And it kind of turns into kind of like a little wetland area, and then it kind of creates, and there's another brook.
Hold on,
Oh,
I think I can.
here.
Wait, is this discussion about a future application? Because I want to focus on the thing I
Yeah,
care
yeah.
about.
Yeah, what do you care about?
Oh, so now, is this person going to be all familiar with the forms?
This person, and I don't remember if she told me her name. This person.
Okay, so here's a,
Oh, and then afterwards I'll tell you a Bobcat story.
Oh, I gotta tell you guys about a beach story on Flanagan Pond. I wanna make a beach. I want a beach.
All right, I didn't put her, oh,
I just wanna fill in my backyard with sand.
So it's, of those little grids, it's 7 and 8. But an abutter called up asking for, how do they know where it was? So I took pictures with my phone, emailed them to myself, and then printed those out and sent them. So just, cause he
Oh,
got
wow.
the abutter notice.
so they want to do 1 through 8?
Yeah, so, but currently only 7 and 8 are, either 7 and 8 are only jurisdictional, or they're not ready to do 1 through 6 yet.
Okay. So I don't have the young lady's name. I reached out to Lee and I said, the first thing I did was I reached out and I said, do you have somebody who could do this? And I said, it's not going to be too much of an imposition. She says she has a bright young, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed person who would come in and do a great job. She said she's tough, out of college, and I already warned her what the pay range was, because I said I didn't want to steal her because I don't want Lee to be angry at us. And she said no, it's she is in a position over there where she's doing great work, and so she would be taking this on. This would be something well within her skill set.
Okay, so we do have the Orion COC, which I haven't been to, George.
Orion behind the, okay.
Yeah.
So
So we,
yeah.
yeah.
this is
Might be-
all nothing to discuss now.
No,
We
it's
can't
just-
do anything about it.
No, it's just to make sure somebody can come in, it's like, oh yeah, an order of conditions, oh yeah, COC.
Right. Well, that was the whole point of.
So she's able to do,
She will be able to do
Does she-
all of it. And here's the best part. Let's say something came in, she didn't know what to do. Assume you should call Lee.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much experience does she have?
I don't know. She's
She just
out
out
of
of
school with
college?
a degree. She's out of school for a couple of years, and she's been a PSC.
Grad school? Or BS?
What level did you think they dug? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I do not know how.
I was really responsible, and I said, would this be a good person for us? Do you have a good person? And Lee said, I have a great person for you. And I
she
said,
knows.
trust is what counts.
Yeah, she knows.
Yeah.
She also told me that they have 2 huge bobcats over at the Willows, and they see them all the time dragging dead rabbits.
Oh, bobcats, not the heavy equipment, the bobcat.
No, bobcat the animal,
That's
not the
cool.
skid steer.
Okay.
Noah called me 2 days ago, and he was like, bruh, I just saw this huge
Yeah.
bobcat. He's up at his uncle's house in Concord, New Hampshire doing
Wow.
work. And he was digging along the side of the driveway, and he looks up,
Right.
and there's a bobcat walking across, and he's like, it was the size of
Wow.
a good-sized dog. It was
Wow.
big. And I was like, that's really cool. I said,
Wow.
no picture.
Indoor cats.
Well,
No picture.
that's actually good to know. That
Yeah.
there's
All right,
nice
so
big game animals living
healthy
here.
game animals, and they're not
Yeah.
mountain lions. So I told her, I said, hoping that we could start her next Tuesday. And she said she would conform, but according to their own schedule, internal schedule, she said, yep. And I said that the old CA used to wear sundresses, but she can be just business casual. And
Hey, George, do you
and
have
she said,
keys?
Becky, and I said, no, Brian.
Keys
Yeah.
to the office?
I have keys.
Hmm?
I still have keys.
Yeah.
You carry them with you? Is that the lanyard he had them on?
She gave me.
That was the lanyard, the
Nah,
cheap one
that-
that I got a few years ago when
That's yours.
somebody.
I think I already complained about this.
Yeah.
I think I have a tie that looks like that.
Okay,
So,
so the point is that for a 4-week period, we would entertain using this person for 2 days a week. At the end of that 4-week period, we would revisit to determine if we wanted to go to 1 day a week or keep it at 4 days a week. We are talking about $1,600 a month out of our wetland protection funds, $400 a week, plus or minus, that would go to maintaining 2 days a week. If we go to 1 day a week, then we are under the level that we were paying.
The MACC has now posted, thanks to
No,
John.
no, no, hold on. One thing at a time.
Okay,
Yes.
does this course, is this related to that?
No.
It's answered, so he
No.
wants us to vote on this.
What do you mean is it answered to it?
No.
Yeah.
You mean the Wetland Protection Funds?
Yeah.
Yeah, Administration of the
Yeah.
Wetland Protection Act.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
we
have-
can use those funds.
We have every right to use those funds.
And
We are-
many towns do.
Right, we are doing something to fill an emergency need that I am hoping is not longer than
Right.
12
And
weeks.
did you see Robert's response to your email?
Yeah, he said, I don't want to spend more money than he asked that we not spend more money.
Right, and he said, he said the person could start next week once we vote.
Right, which is what I'm continuing to try, and George is dying to say something. Go ahead, George.
That was my question, is what's the process for, do we have to sign a contract, do we have to,
So what would happen is that she already gave us a proposal
right?
that we would then enter into with them. So, and Robert said it could start next week. So I'm not being loosey-goosey about it, but if we had approval tonight, today's Wednesday instead of Thursday, so we have 2 days left in the week. If we go ahead and notify Robert tomorrow that we have voted on this tonight as a commission and that we are ready to move forward, can he please work with BSC, here's the contact information, to make sure that this gets going for next week? And then even if we had to call a personal favor in that she start on Tuesday, we have 3 business days to get everything all set. That's my personal opinion.
I was just thinking, does the selectmen have to act on it?
No, that was why I wrote and I said, what are the next steps? And he said they can start next week, because what I was worried about was we had to wait for the select persons to do the same thing.
I hate this. Sometimes you have to scroll through so many versions.
And all all the legality stuff is all taken, I mean, it's BSC is.
Yeah.
BSC is an engineering
responsible
company.
for this person.
Right.
The town of Ayer is not responsible, like in terms of,
Yeah.
you know,
Um,
issues. Like if, you know, she does something.
What if she cuts a person?
Oh, yeah, if she, you know.
See how I cleaned
make-
that up for you?
Yeah, all Robert said there.
Anything.
Yeah, no requirements for advertising the position. I've notified the union of our proposal. I'm awaiting a response. I do not anticipate there to be any issue. Commission needs to approve the proposal and the individual could start next week. His only concern is that funding does not create a deficit, which we have means to.
We have addressed. Right. And
Right.
I knew we'd be fine. I knew it.
Bonnie wants to know liability.
No, because no, I read, so the town of Lancaster had a similar problem,
Okay.
right? Do you know about the town of Lancaster?
I know where it is and I eat breakfast there all the time.
Yeah, no, they had a similar problem where their agent left and they were without an agent and they were trying to figure out, they had no money. And so they shared, they shared with another town. And so the legal issues of sharing with another town, their conservation agent. So, you know, came
Oh,
with-
actually, no, so we had this whole discussion. So the only issues as far as the sharing
Right,
were with regard to benefits and that kind of thing.
yeah.
So we had that discussion months and months ago when we were trying to figure out how to deal with that.
Years ago?
Was it
Okay.
years?
Well, before we hired,
It was years.
in our lengthy search before, and
Yeah.
which was also prior to Bonnie joining our illustrious company.
Okay, so contract. So we're gonna be signing a contract with
So
BSC.
Yeah. Is that what you printed out from BSC?
Well,
I just
no.
never printed it out.
No. Okay, yeah, so everything's negotiated through, you know, all this is negotiated through BSC,
Correct.
right? Okay.
I'm trying to figure out what you're worried about.
I guess.
I don't mean that in a negative way. What are your concerns so I can address them directly, because it is now 20 minutes of time.
I'm not, you know, I'm just.
And tomorrow night we're going to be here till 12:30.
No, we're not.
No, I'm just,
Did you see that friggin' agenda?
I'm just.
But Finger Hill's gonna go fast, right? You said so.
No, I guess I'm just worried about, is everything, all right, nothing. You know, it's okay. I'm not worried anymore. I'm just blabbing.
Are you mothering this?
I'm mothering this.
All right.
I was just concerned about this. It kind of happened
Do you know why I'm not
very
concerned?
fast. What?
Well, it happened
Why not?
fast. This is how all this stuff is supposed to go.
Yeah.
Look, we need an outside consultant, and this person is a person who is a professional who does this for a living. just as if we were to hire that person and they worked for the town of Ayer, they would be a person
Coming from a reputable source, from a former
Okay.
coming from a
commissioner.
reputable firm,
Okay.
who, if at the end of the day, if there's any issue or we have any problem or we have any
Right,
question
right.
or she wears a perfume people don't like, we have the ability to work backwards in a much more simple way than we do if that person actually works for us. To work to amend anything that has to happen. Or even better, to call up and say, this isn't working out, do you have another person? Or maybe it doesn't, we say thank you very much and we pay and we bring in a different person.
Okay, all right, all right.
We're not committed.
Have you,
That's right, we're not committed.
for what it's worth,
Right.
this is
Right.
what I do.
It's basically week to, right.
This
right.
is what I do.
It's like a
This
temp.
is as it
We're
doesn't.
paying,
There was another
Temp
person
position.
that we had before that, but it's like, I had concerns if we took this other person, it'd be very awkward, you know.
If, for instance, if that person applied for the final position and didn't get it.
Yes, and I believe the beginnings of the Anuta problem had happened under that person during maternity leave.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't remember having maternity leave.
The
So
first-
anyway.
The first one.
Becky's.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. All right,
So you want-
all right.
I would like to vote because we said we had to vote. Well, Robert said we had to vote. So I would accept a motion that the Conservation Commission follow up on a contract that has been offered to us by BSC to engage a person from their company to work for us for 2 days a week. The funds for that to come from available funds for
Stop talking so fast.
talk to text.
Funds.
Available funds.
Come
Come
from. Continue. The
Available
to
funds
come.
to come from Conservation Commission's salary for the CA and additional funds to come from WPA money. We will entertain this position for 1 month at 2 days a week and reevaluate in August. And so that nobody thinks they're sending their life away, the intention is that this 2 day a week person is engaged with us for no longer than 12 weeks or 3 months. That way we are all on the same page. Makes sense? No one's asking this to be forever. And in fact, at the end of 12 weeks, any one of you could stand up and say, I'm not doing this anymore, get out of here. But wait to the end of the meeting. So, I would accept a motion for all that.
So moved.
There we go.
I think
Is there,
Second.
is there any further discussion or any more concerns? Do you understand why this is so
I
valuable?
understand why it's so valuable, yes.
Really is.
Yes, it's very valuable,
It really is.
yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Wonderful. I will notify Robert right now that we voted on this. I gotta find his email, don't I?
TA@air.ma. Oh, no,
Dot-
whatever.
dot
No, I
US.
got it. Oh, here it is.
US.
Us.
The ad is now on the town's website
And
and
he's,
Facebook page.
Yeah.
and he's prepared it for
Yeah.
the Lowell Sun.
Good.
Robert's sending one to the Little Sun.
Yep.
George has got it
Yep.
listed at MACC.
Yep, yep.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
So
I've already been questioned
I
about.
told Lindsay that we were, just, she knew you were
wants them in
coming.
on the website, the town
I
website.
called her.
Which is good, because you're.
I called her to ask her if she had like a list of area towns that had part-time people. And she said, no, that would be a good idea. And I was like, yes, it would.
Did you, by the way, mention say anything to Mr. Tata about any,
He disappeared. He's off the reservation. He's long gone he took a long walk off a short pier. We haven't seen him. I had left him a message and I had said,
direct anybody?
could we notify them? Well, because I don't know where they are in their search,
Right.
but to notify any applicants that we were going to do this. my feeling was, because I had said to him, he said, well, he goes, oh, I thought you were going to ask me to do something else. I said, no, I just want you to, let the applicants know as you're sending them a letter that says that, they weren't chosen, if you would be so kind to send them one that says, I understand other communities in the area.
That would
So-
be nice. Yep.
Because at least they're looking for right now.
That would be good. That would be good.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight with regard to the items that were on the agenda?
No, we'll have plenty tomorrow night.
No.
Okay, 9:45.
Motion adjourned.
Second.
Oh, what about, wait, just one thing.
Discussion?
Can we talk about just member updates?
Tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, okay, I'll save it for tomorrow
Because
night.
it's not on our agenda for tonight.
Okay.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.